Rain slashed against Lily's face as she sprinted through the dimly lit streets of East Harbor, her thin jacket providing little protection against the November downpour. The diner name tag still pinned to her chest caught the occasional flicker of streetlights as she ran, lungs burning with each desperate breath. She'd found him huddled against the wall outside the 24-hour pharmacy, a small figure in expensive clothes completely soaked through, lips turning an alarming shade of blue. The wheezing sound from his chest had sent ice through her veins. She recognized an asthma attack when she heard one. The boy couldn't speak, just clutched a waterlogged phone in his trembling hand, screen cracked, but still showing his home address on the emergency medical ID. When he'd pointed weakly at it, Lily hadn't hesitated, scooping his slight frame into her arms despite her own exhaustion after a 12-hour shift. The mansion loomed ahead now, an imposing structure of stone and iron gates at the top of Blackwood Hill, a neighborhood Lily had only ever glimpsed from a distance. The contrast between her worn sneakers splashing through puddles and the manicured grounds beyond the gate felt like crossing between worlds. She pressed the intercom with shaking fingers, the boy's breathing growing more labored against her shoulder as she sheltered him with her body. "Please," she gasped into the speaker. "I found a boy. He can't breathe. He needs help immediately." The gates swung open with surprising speed, and Lily staggered forward, her legs burning with the effort of carrying the child up the long driveway. Light spilled from the massive front door as it opened, silhouetting a tall figure whose commanding presence was felt even at a distance. "What's happening?" The man's voice cut through the storm with knife-edge precision, neither raised nor panicked, but filled with quiet authority that made Lily's spine straighten instinctively. Before she could answer, his eyes fell on the small figure in her arms. "Thomas!" The single word contained more emotion than Lily would have thought possible, the man's composed demeanor fracturing for just an instant. He moved with startling speed, closing the distance between them in long strides, taking the boy from her arms with gentle hands that belied his intimidating presence. "Asthma attack," Lily explained quickly, her nursing training kicking in despite her fear. "He needs his inhaler immediately, and probably a nebulizer treatment. I found him 3 blocks from the pharmacy." He couldn't speak. The man's dark eyes assessed her with unnerving intensity, taking in her soaked waitress uniform, the shadows of exhaustion under her eyes, and something in his expression shifted. "Inside," he commanded, already turning toward the door, his son clutched protectively against his chest. The entrance hall dwarfed any room Lily had ever stood in, with marble floors and soaring ceilings that made her sudden awareness of her dripping clothes and muddy shoes all the more acute. A woman in what appeared to be a housekeeper's uniform appeared instantly, directed by the man's quick, "Get Dr. Hayes, now." Within moments, the house erupted into controlled chaos. A middle-aged man in casual clothes but carrying a medical bag appeared. The boy was whisked to a nearby room, and Lily found herself standing alone in the middle of the vast hallway, water pooling beneath her feet. She contemplated simply slipping away, her task complete, when that commanding voice stopped her. "You found my son." The statement hung in the air between them, not a question, but an assessment, as the man returned to the hallway. In the light, Lily could see him clearly now, tall and broad-shouldered, in an expertly tailored shirt, dark hair cut precisely, features that might have been handsome if not for the intensity that made them almost predatory. "Yes," Lily managed, fighting the urge to step backward under his scrutiny. "Outside the pharmacy on Westfield. He couldn't speak but showed me his medical ID with this address." She hesitated, then added, "I'm studying nursing. I recognize the symptoms." Something flickered across his features. Surprise, perhaps, or reassessment. "You carried him 3 blocks uphill in this storm." "Bertway." His eyes tracked over her slight frame with a look that might have been grudging respect. Most people in this city would have called an ambulance and walked away. The unspoken implication that an ambulance would have been unwelcome hung between them, adding to Lily's growing unease about exactly whose home she'd entered. "Is he going to be all right?" she asked instead, rubbing her arms against both the chill and her rising anxiety. "Dr. Hayes is with him," he replied, which wasn't exactly an answer. His gaze hadn't left her face, studying her with an intensity that felt like being dissected. "You're shivering. Come." Again, not a request but a command, delivered with the casual confidence of a man unaccustomed to being refused. He led her through the mansion to what appeared to be a small sitting room, where a fire already blazed in an ornate fireplace. "Sit," he instructed, moving to a cabinet and retrieving 2 crystal glasses. "Drink this. It will warm you." The amber liquid burned pleasantly down Lily's throat, bringing sensation back to her numbed extremities. "Thank you," she murmured, suddenly acutely aware of her surroundings. The priceless artwork on the walls, the hand-knotted carpet beneath her worn shoes, the quiet opulence that spoke of old money and power. A discreet knock at the door preceded the doctor's entrance. "He's stabilized," the man reported, his manner respectful but not subservient. The combination of cold and exertion triggered a severe attack. With rest and continued treatment, he should recover fully by morning. Relief visibly passed through the father's body, a minute relaxation of shoulders that had been held rigid with tension. "Thank you, doctor." The medical man nodded and retreated, leaving them alone again in a silence punctuated only by the crackling of flames. "My name is Alexander Blake," he said finally, studying her over the rim of his glass. "And you are?" The question carried weight beyond mere introduction, an assessment, a categorization of exactly who had entered his carefully controlled domain. "Lily Carter," she replied, struggling not to fidget under his gaze. "I work at Mel's Diner on Westfield. I was walking home when I found your son." She hesitated, then added, "Why was he out alone in this weather? Especially with asthma?" The question was presumptuous, and she knew it immediately. Something dangerous flashed in Alexander's eyes. "My son," he said, each word precisely measured, "was meant to be at his piano lesson with his tutor, who will no longer be employed as of tonight." The controlled fury in his voice made Lily's pulse quicken. "I should go," she said, setting down her glass and rising. "I'm glad Thomas will be all right." She had taken 2 steps toward the door when his voice stopped her. "You have medical training," he stated flatly. "More than basic first aid, given how quickly you assessed Thomas's condition." 3 years of nursing school, Lily admitted, tucking a damp strand of hair behind her ear. "I work nights at the diner to pay tuition. 1 more semester until graduation." Alexander nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "And yet you still stopped to help a child in the rain, carrying him uphill when you must have been exhausted from your shift." His gaze was assessing, calculating in a way that made Lily feel like she was being valued, rather than merely seen. "Thomas has severe asthma," he continued, setting down his glass with deliberate precision. "It's been poorly controlled since his mother's death 2 years ago. His previous nurse quit suddenly last week. Family emergency, supposedly." The implication in his tone suggested he didn't entirely believe the excuse. "I've been interviewing replacements, but finding someone both qualified and discreet has proven challenging." His eyes never left hers, measuring her reaction with unnerving focus. "Mr. Blake, I should really be going," Lily said, feeling increasingly uneasy under his scrutiny. The rain still pounded against the windows, punctuating the silence between them like distant gunfire. "I'm offering you a job, Ms. Carter," he stated flatly, ignoring her attempt to leave. "Live-in nurse for Thomas. Your tuition covered in full plus salary. You'd have your own suite in the East Wing, complete privacy when off duty." Lily blinked, certain she had misheard. "You want to hire me? You don't know anything about me." The absurdity of it, offering employment to a soaking wet waitress who had appeared on his doorstep, momentarily overrode her growing suspicion about exactly who Alexander Blake might be. "I know you recognized an asthma attack instantly. I know you carried a child through a storm rather than leaving him. I know you're intelligent enough to be nearly finished with nursing school, despite clearly struggling financially." His eyes narrowed slightly. "I'll know everything else about you by morning." A chill that had nothing to do with her wet clothes ran down Lily's spine. "Everything else?" she repeated, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Background check, references, academic records." He waved a hand dismissively, as if these were trivial matters. "But I already know what matters. Thomas responded to you. He let you help him, which is unusual. He doesn't trust easily." The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly in the silence that followed. "Why would you trust me with your son?" Lily finally asked, meeting his gaze directly. "Especially if he doesn't trust easily?" Something flickered across Alexander's face. Vulnerability, perhaps. Gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Because I saw how you looked at him. Not as the son of whoever you think I might be, but as a child who needed help. That's rare in my experience." 3 days later, Lily stood in what was now her room, a suite larger than the entire apartment she had shared with 2 roommates. Morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens, where fountains sparkled in the distance. The decision had been impulsive, perhaps reckless, packing her meager belongings, explaining to her stunned roommates, requesting emergency leave from her nursing program, which had been mysteriously pre-approved. Yet something about the intensity in Alexander's eyes when he spoke of his son had resonated with her. Her new wardrobe had arrived that morning, simple but clearly expensive clothing that somehow fit perfectly, though she'd never provided measurements. The note accompanying them had been terse. Appropriate attire for household staff. A knock at the door revealed Mrs. K. Winters, the housekeeper, a stern woman with silver-streaked hair and impeccable posture. "Thomas is awake," she announced without preamble. "Mr. Blake instructed that you should join them for breakfast to establish routine." The dining room, like everything else in the mansion, was unnecessarily grand. A table that could seat 20 dominated the space, though only 2 places were set at one end. Thomas sat quietly, thin shoulders hunched beneath expensive pajamas, pushing eggs around his plate with obvious disinterest. "Good morning," Lily said gently, taking the seat across from him. The boy's eyes flickered up briefly, dark like his father's but lacking the intensity, filled instead with a wariness that seemed inappropriate for an 8-year-old. Alexander entered a moment later, already dressed in what appeared to be a bespoke suit despite the early hour. "Thomas," he said, his tone noticeably softer than Lily had heard him use with anyone else. "This is Miss Carter. She'll be helping manage your asthma and staying with us for a while." The boy nodded without looking up, his silence stretching uncomfortably, until Alexander continued. "She's the one who found you in the storm. She carried you all the way home." This finally provoked a reaction. Thomas glanced up, studying Lily with newfound curiosity. "You didn't call the ambulance?" he asked, his voice surprisingly clear despite his recent attack. "I thought it would be faster to bring you home," Lily answered honestly, noting how both father and son seemed to tense at the mention of emergency services. "And I could tell you needed help right away." Throughout breakfast, Lily observed the dynamics between father and son. Alexander's obvious concern masked behind formality, Thomas's quiet compliance tinged with something like resignation. Conversation was minimal, functional rather than warm, as if neither knew quite how to bridge the gap between them. Later, as she followed Thomas to his room to establish his medication routine, Lily noticed details she'd been too overwhelmed to see the night of the storm. Security cameras discreetly positioned at every corner, men in suits who weren't quite butler or household staff patrolling the grounds, reinforced windows despite the estate's remote location. "Your father seems very concerned about security," she commented casually, as she checked Thomas's peak flow meter readings, recording them in the chart Dr. Hayes had provided. The boy's expression remained carefully neutral. "People want to hurt Papa sometimes," he said matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "That's why I'm not supposed to be alone outside." 2 weeks into her new position, Lily had established a routine that centered entirely around Thomas's care. The boy was quiet but intelligent, obediently following her medical instructions, while revealing almost nothing of himself in their interactions. "Have you always had asthma?" Lily asked one afternoon as they walked the perimeter of the garden, a daily exercise regimen she'd implemented to improve his lung capacity. Security personnel maintained a discreet distance, visible but never intrusive. Thomas shook his head, eyes fixed on the path ahead. "It started after Mom died," he said quietly. "Papa took me to many doctors. They said sometimes stress can make your body sick." The simple explanation contained volumes of unspoken trauma. Lily resisted the urge to press further, instead choosing another approach. "I lost my dad when I was 11, she offered. "For a whole year after, I had these horrible headaches that no one could explain." Something shifted in the boy's expression. Not quite connection, but recognition. "Did they ever stop?" he asked, genuine curiosity breaking through his usual reserve. "They did. Once I stopped trying so hard to be perfect for my mom," Lily admitted. "I thought if I was perfect, she wouldn't be sad about Dad anymore. But trying to be perfect all the time just made me sick." Thomas's steps slowed, his eyes suddenly intent on hers. "I try to be perfect for Papa," he whispered, as if confessing a secret. "I don't want him to be alone if I get sick like Mom did." The revelation struck Lily like a physical blow. This child wasn't just dealing with the loss of his mother, but carrying the impossible burden of believing he needed to protect his father from further loss. "Thomas, your mother's illness wasn't because of anything she did or didn't do," Lily said carefully, kneeling to meet his eye level. "And your asthma isn't your fault either. No one expects you to be perfect." The boy's expression suggested profound skepticism. "Papa needs everything perfect. That's what Uncle James says. That's why everyone is afraid of him." Before Lily could respond to this troubling statement, Alexander appeared on the garden path ahead, emerging from what appeared to be a heated discussion with two men in suits. His face transformed instantly upon seeing Thomas, the hardness melting into something almost gentle. "Papa," Thomas called, the first display of genuine childlike enthusiasm Lily had witnessed from him. He ran toward his father, who swept him up with surprising tenderness. The contrast between this gentleness and the intimidating figure he presented to others striking Lily anew. "How is your breathing today?" Alexander asked, setting his son down, but keeping a hand protectively on his shoulder. His eyes briefly met Lily's over Thomas's head, carrying an unspoken question. "Better," she responded to his silent inquiry. "Peak flow readings are up 15% since I started him on the new medication schedule, and the daily walks are helping build stamina." Something like approval flickered across Alexander's features. "Good. Thomas, Mrs. Winters has prepared your lunch. Go inside while I speak with Ms. Carter." Once Thomas had disappeared inside, Alexander's demeanor shifted, the warmth replaced by the calculating intensity Lily had come to recognize as his default state. "There's been a security concern," he stated without preamble. "Is Thomas in danger?" Lily asked immediately, her protective instincts flaring. In just 2 weeks, she'd grown unexpectedly attached to the solemn little boy with old eyes. Alexander studied her reaction with interest before answering. "Not directly, but precautions are being increased. You'll notice more security personnel. Do not take Thomas outside the perimeter fence under any circumstances." The implication hung heavily between them, that someone might use Thomas to get to his father. "He told me people sometimes want to hurt you," Lily ventured, watching Alexander's face carefully. His expression hardened. "My business creates rivals. Thomas shouldn't concern himself with such matters." The deliberate vagueness only confirmed Lily's growing suspicions about exactly what kind of business Alexander Blake conducted. She chose her next words carefully. "Thomas believes his asthma developed because of stress after his mother died, that he needs to be perfect to protect you from being alone if he gets sick like Mom did." Something raw flashed across Alexander's face. Grief, perhaps, or anger, gone so quickly Lily might have imagined it. "His mother had leukemia," he said, voice tightly controlled. "It was diagnosed too late for effective treatment." The controlled precision of his speech couldn't quite mask the underlying pain. Thomas was with her when she collapsed at home. The doctors believe witnessing that trauma triggered his first attack. Lily absorbed this information, understanding better now the fear she sometimes glimpsed in Thomas's eyes. "He's carrying a heavy burden for an 8-year-old, trying to be perfect to keep you from being hurt again." Alexander's jaw tightened visibly. "I never asked that of him." The words carried defensive heat, rare emotion breaking through his usual control. "Children often assign themselves impossible tasks in the face of loss," Lily said gently, "especially when they don't understand what's happening. He needs to know his asthma isn't his failure to be perfect." Alexander stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his gaze. "You speak as if from experience," he observed, the statement carrying a question. "My father's death was sudden. Car accident," Lily admitted. "I convinced myself if I was perfect enough, I could prevent anything bad from happening to my mom too. It took years to understand I couldn't control everything." 3 days later, the mansion hummed with tense energy. Security had doubled overnight. Dark-suited men with earpieces positioned at every entrance, their watchful gazes following Lily's movements with barely disguised suspicion. "What's happening?" she asked Mrs. Winters as they passed in the hallway, the older woman's usually composed face lined with worry. "Business matters," the housekeeper replied stiffly, her eyes darting to the security camera above them. "Mr. Blake has instructed that Thomas should remain in the East Wing today. His piano lesson has been canceled." Thomas seemed to absorb the tension like a sponge, his breathing growing increasingly labored throughout the morning, despite Lily's best efforts to maintain normalcy. "Why can't I see Papa today?" he asked repeatedly, his anxiety manifesting physically as his airways constricted. "Your father is very busy," Lily explained, administering his inhaler for the 3rd time in 2 hours. "Let's focus on your breathing exercises, okay? In through your nose, count to 4. By afternoon, Thomas's condition had deteriorated significantly. His peak flow readings had dropped to dangerous levels, his skin taking on a grayish tinge as he struggled for air. "I need Dr. Hayes," Lily told the security guard stationed outside Thomas's room, medical urgency overriding her usual deference to the household's mysterious protocols. "Now, and Mr. Blake needs to be informed." The guard's eyes widened at Thomas's obvious distress. "Mr. Blake is unavailable. He left strict instructions not to be disturbed under any circumstances. "This is a medical emergency," Lily insisted, her voice sharp with authority she didn't know she possessed. "His son can't breathe. Get the doctor or I'm calling an ambulance myself." The threat of outside intervention galvanized the guard into action. Within minutes, Dr. Hayes arrived, his face grim as he assessed Thomas's condition. "Severe bronchoconstriction," he murmured, preparing a nebulizer treatment with practiced efficiency. "Likely triggered by stress. Has something upset him today?" The increased security, his father's absence, the canceled lessons. "He senses something's wrong," Lily explained, holding Thomas's hand as the medication was administered. "His anxiety triggers the asthma, which increases the anxiety." Hours passed intense vigilance, Dr. Hayes eventually leaving with instructions to monitor Thomas through the night. "If his oxygen levels drop below 92%, call me immediately," he instructed, his expression grave. Lily sat beside Thomas's bed, one hand resting lightly on his chest to feel each labored breath, the other checking his oxygen monitor. His eyes fluttered open occasionally, panic rising before Lily would soothe him back to fitful sleep. The grandfather clock in the hallway had just struck midnight when the bedroom door opened silently. Alexander stood in the threshold, his usual impeccable appearance disheveled, tie loosened, a small cut visible on his jawline, eyes burning with some unreadable emotion. "How is he?" Alexander asked, his voice barely above a whisper as he approached the bed. The moonlight streaming through the window illuminated Thomas's pale face, making him appear almost ghostly against the dark sheets. "Stable, but fragile," Lily answered honestly. "The attack was severe, brought on by emotional distress. He knew something was wrong today, and not being able to see you escalated his anxiety." Alexander's carefully maintained control seemed to crack as he sank into the chair on the opposite side of the bed. "I was trying to protect him," he said, the words carrying a weight of irony, "by staying away while I handled a situation." The cut on his jaw, the rumpled appearance, the situation. Lily didn't need explicit confirmation of what had occurred today. "You can't protect him by disappearing," she said softly. "That only confirms his worst fears." Alexander's eyes met hers across Thomas's sleeping form. "You're not afraid to speak directly to me," he observed, something like respect coloring his tone. "Most people in this house wouldn't dare." "There have been others before you," Alexander said quietly, fingers absently tracing the small cut on his jaw. "Nurses, tutors, specialists, all professionally qualified, but none willing to challenge me about what Thomas truly needs. They saw only what I could do to them, not what I was doing to him." Lily felt the weight of this admission, how this dangerous man had surrounded himself with people too afraid to speak truth, creating an isolation that extended to his son. "Fear creates distance," she observed, watching Thomas's chest rise and fall with each breath. "And children sense distance more acutely than adults. It's why he thought he needed to be perfect." "I'm not employed to fear you," Lily replied simply. "I'm here for Thomas. And right now, what he needs is his father, not the businessman, not the—" She hesitated, then continued, "not whatever else you might be." Something dangerous flickered across Alexander's face before softening as he looked down at his son. "His mother used to say the same thing," he admitted, gently brushing hair from Thomas's forehead, "that I needed to separate my worlds better." Morning found them still there, Lily having dozed in her chair while Alexander maintained his vigil. Thomas woke first, his eyes widening in surprise at finding his father asleep at his bedside, hand still resting protectively on his arm. "Papa?" he whispered, voice scratchy from the previous day's struggle. Alexander woke instantly, years of vigilance evident in the immediate alertness that replaced sleep. "I'm here, Thomas," he said softly, relief evident in his eyes as he noted his son's improved color and steadier breathing. "I'm sorry I wasn't here yesterday when you needed me." With a simple apology, perhaps the first Thomas had ever heard from his father, seemed to affect the boy profoundly. "You're not disappointed that I got sick again?" he asked hesitantly, vulnerability plain on his small face. Alexander's expression crumbled, the composed mask falling away completely. "Never," he said fiercely. "Your health is not something you can control through willpower. It's not a failure or weakness." Over the following weeks, subtle but significant changes transformed the household. Security remained tight, but Alexander began including Thomas in more aspects of his daily life, taking meals together consistently, scheduling regular time for just the two of them, explaining his absences honestly when business required them. Lily observed these changes with quiet satisfaction, recognizing the delicate balance being struck between Alexander's dangerous world and his devotion to his son. Her own role evolved as well, becoming less formal caretaker and more trusted ally to them both. "He smiles now," Alexander commented one evening as they watched Thomas playing in the garden, his breathing strong and even after a month of consistent treatment and reduced stress. "I hadn't realized how rarely that happened before you came." Lily felt warmth bloom in her chest at the observation. "Children are resilient when they feel secure," she replied. "He doesn't feel he has to carry the weight of your happiness anymore." Alexander's gaze shifted to her face, studying her with the intensity that still made her pulse quicken, though no longer from fear. "And what about you, Lily?" he asked, using her first name for the first time. "Are you secure here, between these worlds you've crossed into?" The question contained multitudes: acknowledgement of his dangerous life, recognition of her choice to remain, despite learning the truth, perhaps even something more personal, that neither had dared voice directly. "I came here because a child needed help," she answered carefully, meeting his gaze. "I stayed because two people needed healing, one from asthma, the other from isolation. I'm exactly where I choose to be." Thank you all for following this story. If you've enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is important for me to continue creating these stories for you.